Hi guys, welcome to Friday's devotion, and I'm glad that I get to be with you here with you again another week. So last Friday our focus was on faith and through finding peace and the message that Jesus brought when he came back at a time where it seemed like faith wasn't possible, and his message was peace. And so I kind of want to continue with another story that builds on these same ideas of how to find faithfulness and where to be encouraged to have faith. And a while back at church, I was able to teach a whole class on Jonah, and I think that today this book has super relevance into what we're going through, and that it can have some great value and it can shed some more light on this concept of faithfulness. Plus, Jonah sort of fits into this theme that I've been having every week of finding characters in the Bible that have either experienced self-quarantine or are sheltering in place, and Jonah definitely fits in this category where at first he tries to self-quarantine himself by traveling to Tarshish and getting away from all the crazy that he thinks is about to happen, and then he literally shelters in place where he builds his own shelter and sits up on a hill and is willing to wait for 30 days away from everybody to watch the destruction of Nineveh. And so I know it's a little bit of a stretch, but I feel like it's kind of fun to have this kind of common ties that we can see that the people, the characters that are in the Bible kind of, in a way, share some of what we're going through today. So let's dive into the book of Jonah and see what God has for us today. So in the book of Jonah, we can see that sometimes we're called to do things that are hard, and that we're especially called to do things that sometimes we just don't agree with. Jonah doesn't want to go and preach to the Ninevites, and in fact he probably doesn't think that they're worthy of being saved. There are some terrible people, and that they didn't treat the Jews well, and he couldn't comprehend the fact that was something that he should do, so he didn't agree with it. But ultimately God has a different plan for Jonah than what Jonah thinks his plan should be. And along the way, he wants to teach Jonah a lesson in faithfulness. And so he does this by, in chapter 1, he shows mercy as a result of the faithfulness of the sailors. In chapter 2, he shows mercy to Jonah himself as he pledges to be faithful from the bottom of the sea and from the belly of the whale. In chapter 3, he shows Jonah a miracle as people of Nineveh listen to him and don't harm him and don't kill him as he thinks they were, as a result of Jonah's actual faithfulness. And in chapter 4, we shows that the Ninevites' mercy as they demonstrate their willingness to be faithful. But ultimately, though, I find that the book of Jonah is a story about the faithfulness of God, and not necessarily the faithfulness of these characters. And we see this best represented by God's endless pursuit of Jonah, despite Jonah's attempts to constantly run away from God and what God has said. But Jonah went through a lot of personal struggles through this book. First, he thought that he could actually run away from God, that was something that was possible. And then B, he says that Jonah struggles to be faithful throughout this whole journey. You can see his song that he sings from the bottom of the ocean and things like, or the sea. And he's just struggling to be faithful. And he struggles to be faithful throughout the entire book. Even when he's done what God has called him to, he doesn't believe that what he's done is actually going to help. So that's still a lack of faith there. And ultimately, he struggled to understand the heart of God. But none of these struggles that Jonah is going through has stopped God from trying to teach Jonah and to show Jonah his faithfulness. And then every character in this book of Jonah has flaws, and it's and concerns, and they don't always follow God, or they don't even believe in God at times. But God shows that he doesn't leave these people behind. He continues to be present regardless of the fact that people don't necessarily have faith or believe in him. But God tells us in chapter 4 that his love and his concern is about the fact that this is his creation, that he has created these people. And just because things may be chaotic, like how the sailors felt, or maybe how you're feeling with all of this that's going on, or maybe how it was graven, like how Jonah felt at the bottom of the sea when he thought he was going to die, or at the belly of the fish when he wasn't sure of his fate. Or maybe as we see the numbers continue to climb, we continue to feel that it's graven here, right? Or maybe even fearful, right? Like how the people of Nineveh felt fearful after hearing what Jonah actually had to say in his proclamation. We cannot allow our eyes to be distracted by this disappearance of our comfort right here today and our way of doing things as a way of keeping us distracted from seeing the faithfulness of God. We have to keep our eyes focused on God and his love that continues for us time and time again. God tells us this at the end of verse 4, the end of chapter 4. It's the very last two verses of this entire book. And I think this really shows the heart of God. It says, "But the Lord said, you have been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and it died overnight. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city?" So here the Lord is talking to Jonah, and Jonah is upset because he had built his shelter in place and he was ready for the show of the destruction of Nineveh. And God gave him a little vine, a little plant that covered his head and shielded him from the shade. And then God took that plant away. And so now this sense of comfort was gone from Jonah. And Jonah's mad. He's upset about the fact that maybe the Ninevites might be saved. He's upset that this thing has died and that he no longer has shade. And so God says, like, why are you so attached to this thing that you had nothing to do with? You did not create them. You are not this vine's creator, and you are not the creator of these people. But look at how much passion you have over the loss of this small, insignificant vine. How much more should I be concerned about the loss of these lives, right? Shouldn't I want to save them? And so I think this shows that God is faithful to these people. Even though they've treated the Jews horribly, he is still faithful. And he's trying to show Jonah that he's faithful also to Jonah. And he wants Jonah to experience this joy of his creation. And so as we're struggling to deal with all of this new change and our loss of comfort, our loss of our little vine, our loss of what we knew as normal, and this everybody's talking about this new normal, and we don't want to do it, we have to recognize that this whole thing is his creation all around us, that the whole world is his people, and that God can see what we can't see. He has shown us that he has great things in store for us if we can just simply be faithful. But most importantly, he has shown us that even when things seem the hardest, his faithfulness will never leave us. Even when we're not faithful, he will never leave us, and he will never stop pursuing us. Jonah goes through great lengths to just try to avoid what God has planned, and he doesn't understand God's purpose. And so I know that as we're looking at this situation, it's hard to see God's purpose. It's hard to understand how he has control in this time of, chaos and fear, right? I encourage you to read this book of Jonah, and it's not just a story about a man who survives living in the belly of a fish. It's just a few small verses that are, in my mind, ultimately insignificant to the whole story of Jonah. Jonah is struggling to find the heart of God. He's struggling to connect what he has, his preconceived notions to be of what God should be doing and what God actually is doing. And so read this story. It's very short. It's 4 chapters. But I hope that you can find peace in knowing that God never stops pursuing Jonah, despite the fact that Jonah is not a great guy in this story. He's not. And sometimes we're not great people, and we don't do what we should do, but yet God will never stop pursuing us. And that's what we should have faith in, and that's where we can find maybe some more peace. And so I've got a few more songs for you guys. You Are Not Alone by Meredith Andrews, a really great, encouraging song if you're feeling like you're all by yourself in your house. I've got an oldie but a goodie, Love Song by Third Day. It kind of expresses the love of the Lord and just how great it is. And then I've got a song by Mercy Me. We all know who they are, but maybe it's a track that you guys haven't really listened to, and it's called All Because of This, and it's a reminder of why we do what we're doing, and why we should remain faithful, and why we should remain positive, and why we can have faith at a time where a lot of the world is afraid and is scared and is, you know, maybe even hopeless. So I encourage you with those songs. I encourage you with the story of Jonah and the faithfulness of God. So I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Okay, bye.